Welcome, everybody. I'm Steve Morris, and I'd like to welcome you to this panel session on SBIR and STTR programs that provide non-dilutive funding for early stage tech startups. And our program today is brought to you by OTBC, which is an incubator for startups in Beaverton, Oregon, and by VirtuLab, which is a nonprofit that fights climate change by providing funding and support to clean tech startups. And they also help with SBIR-STTR applications, not just from clean tech companies, but from all kinds of companies, specifically in Oregon, because they have some grant funding for that. You'll find links to both OTBC and VirtuLab in the notes on the live stream. Just a quick note about the goal, really, for this program is to increase awareness of SBIR and STTR. And to prove that although, yeah, there's some red tape and it's complicated, it absolutely is doable, even for small early stage startups. And not only doable in terms of getting the money, but it's a very important source of R&D funding for tech startups. It's that kind of funding is hard to get anywhere else. There's a lot more SBIR, STTR information and a lot more background on our panelists at the OTBC SBIR STTR Success Center. There's a link for that in the notes also. And yeah, I'd like to thank, first of all, our moderator, Leon Wolf with VirtuLab. And he'll tell you a little bit more about himself and VirtuLab. But I can say he's got a great deal of experience doing SBIR and STTR funding work, helping companies apply for that. And would also like to thank our three panelists, Emily Parisi, Naya Zarate, and Katie Schaefer. We very much appreciate you all sharing your insights, both in the videos on the website, as well as here in the panel session. And one final note, the special offer. We have the opportunity for Oregon companies and at least 10 companies outside of Oregon to get a free 20-minute consultation with Leon about SBIR STTR strategy. There's a link for both Oregon and non-Oregon companies in the notes to the live stream. So be sure to take advantage of that, because Leon knows a lot about this stuff and can definitely provide some helpful advice. With that, I would like to turn the virtual microphone over to Leon, who will briefly describe what these programs are, and then we'll get into some questions for the panel. So Leon, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and hello everybody on the YouTube live stream. As mentioned, my name is Leon Wolf, and I work some of the time as an SBIR Proposal Assistance Manager for VirtuLab, which is a clean tech economic development nonprofit located virtually in Portland, but serving all of Oregon and the Northwest. And in just a few moments, I will kick this off with SBIR content and get to the success story panel you've all registered to hear, but just a couple of housekeeping items. So we're all on a Zoom meeting and you're all in YouTube land, but we can see your questions if you type them into the chat, the comments panel on YouTube. And Steve will read those. Steve will be scanning those and reading them as we move along. If you have any questions on SBIR basics, you're welcome and encouraged to type them in, but we won't be actually responding to the questions until after the panel has run through some of their background and content. So as you can see from the agenda, I'll be sharing in one moment. We have just a few minutes on SBIR basics that I'll go over to get everyone up to speed. We've already done the introduction. I'll probably talk for about 10 minutes on those basics, but this is not an in-depth SBIR how to prepare a proposal workshop. If you're interested in that depth, we do have some recommendations for you during the presentation and as well as in the notes and on our respective websites at VirtuLab and OTBC. So again, if there are questions on basics, just type them into the comments pane and we'll get to them after the panel. So after I do those basics, then I'm going to briefly introduce each of the three successful SBIR businesses, and we'll get some background on them and ask some questions. But we hope that quite a lot of This presentation is about answering your questions. So we encourage you to type those questions into YouTube, and we'll have at least a good half hour of open Q&A after the formal presentations. So thanks again, and with that, I'll go ahead and get started. All right, we've been saying SBIR and STTR, but some of you may not actually even know what that stands for. So
Leon, I think you might be sharing the wrong window because we're not seeing.
Sorry, let's try that again.
This is the problem with too many windows open.
Thanks. Yeah, I saw your chat.
And they're little tiny thumbnails, which makes it hard to
share
figure out which is the right one. Ah, that looks more like slides.
All right, sorry about that, those of you in YouTube land. And let us now get just one more minute. Sorry, folks. All right, I'm going to have to do this. Okay, there we go. How is it now, Steve?
That looks good.
Great. All right. Without further, with a little bit of ado, what we're talking about today is the SBIR and STTR federal funding program with grants and contracts for small businesses. And SBIR and STTR, in case you've been wondering, stands for Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Tech Transfer. And they're really one program. And so when I refer to SBIR, I actually mean both SBIR and STTR. So what this program is a series of programs, federal programs at 12 different federal government agencies that do a wide variety of research and provide almost $4 billion of grants and contracts to small businesses to do that research at the small business, specifically for technologies with some degree of commercial potential. They can be very early stage, but this is not simply for basic research. The best way to think about SBIR and STTR is that it's kind of a cross between a university research grant, although this technology doesn't have to be from a university, mixed with an investment from a venture capital, but that's usually for much later stage businesses. The government is providing no cost grants or contracts that do not need to be repaid directly to a small business in order to commercialize this technology, grow US competitiveness on a global scale, and generate high-value jobs and income within the United States. And lately, they've been starting to build this as America's seed fund. So you can think of this as a seed for starting a small business or a new technology or industry. I'm not going to go into all of the agencies that have SBIR funding and are actually the ones to accept and administer the grants and fund them, but I do have a backup slide if anybody wants to dive into that during the Q&A period. But as you might expect, the agencies, if you are familiar with any of the federal agencies that do technology, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, NASA, US Department of Agriculture are all agencies I work with quite a bit, as well as, of course, the Department of Defense, which has the largest research budget in the federal government. And each of these companies has slightly different, each of these agencies has slightly different rules and will only fund things that are aligned with their mission or their particular area of focus. So you have to be developing something that they're interested in and have some stake in being commercialized. Again, there's a wealth of more information on the federal government website at www.sbir.gov shown on this slide, and I'd be glad to answer questions at the end on this. So that's the what it is, but why is this important to those of you who were interested enough to sign up? Well, the most important reason you would be interested in this is if you're starting a small business or already have one, you pretty much need money. That's a common denominator. Either you have to pay salaries, you need to buy materials and supplies, create inventory, do some product development, maybe even do some sales or marketing or demos. You need cash, and the government provides this to small businesses, again, not to a university, but directly for the process of doing that research and product development. The government does not expect this to be paid back. It's not a loan, nor is it an investment in the company. Therefore, it's called non-dilutive, which means the government doesn't take equity, doesn't dilute the value of your company, and again, has no stake in this other than wanting to see you be successful and hire US employees. It's a set aside specifically for small businesses, and I can't understate how important this is. In the world of federal grants and federal contracting, generally, someone would be competing with large businesses, universities, other states, nonprofits. This is literally the only program in the US which is totally set aside for small businesses. And therefore, you can be, as a small business, much more competitive. Except for a few state seed funds or other things like that, tied to usually some industry, there's nothing else like this in the US. And as previously stated, this funds high-risk research and development, not a sure thing. The government wants to see some kind of innovation, usually a science or engineering or technology-oriented advance in the state of the art that you have the secret sauce on that nobody else can duplicate. It may or may not generate intellectual property and a patent, but it has to be something that no one's done before and solves a difficult problem. And finally, companies can actually, or you can actually commercialize this and people will pay money for it. And very often, once you've gone through kind of your friends, family, and your savings account, this is really the only option for a small business when you're getting started. You're usually too early stage for venture capital or for a bank loan. So you should be asking yourself if this is right for you. I'm sure you would like to do this, but not everyone fits the model of an ideal SBIR company. First off, easy to meet, you have to be an eligible small business, either an LLC or an incorporated entity. You have to have some technical innovation, as I said, that meets the needs of the agency. There has to be commercial potential. So not only can you find customers that are willing to pay for it, but is it feasible and economically viable to get it to market? And finally, you don't have to have a team on payroll when you apply, but you have to have access to qualified people to both run the project you propose as well as in the long term get to market. So if the answer to all these questions is, yeah, you think so and you think you're eligible, we'd love to hear from you either by applying online, ask some questions at the end, or submit an online form at the Startup SOS website as listed in the comments. And the first 10 companies will have a 20-minute consult where we can talk in detail about your tech. And with that segue for the Oregon companies that are on the line, VirtuLab does, through the benefit of a federal grant, provide SBIR assistance to qualifying small businesses in much more great extent. That's training and workshops, a monthly newsletter we provide. There's some online videos I recommend you check out. We help you find the right funding and the right solicitation to apply to, help with grant writing. And again, you can either write directly to me as listed here on this slide or apply online at the VirtuLab website. And then again, for non-Oregon companies, the federal government has good tutorials. The Startup SOS website has some great general entrepreneurial and business development information. I do offer private services outside of Oregon, and again, 10 free slots to non-Oregon companies if you sign up. And please look at the notes field on YouTube for further information on resources. So I'm going to take a quick look at all of the comments or all the things that have been coming in Zoom for chat. Is there anything, Steve, that I need to be paying attention to there?
I think the main question so far was just, is there a specific schedule in which things come out? And I did note that, well, yeah, there are schedules and they're different for each agency. And I suggested
Perfect.
that the VirtuLab newsletter might have information on that. Hopefully you'll correct me if I was wrong about that.
Great. Okay, thanks, Steve. Yeah, as long as there's no emergency, I will move on then, and I'll be glad to answer all those questions and more at the end. All right, so as promised, here is the success story panel of 3 entrepreneurs that have both received SBIR funds and have gotten traction in developing some degree of technology product. And really quickly from left to right, Emily Parisi is the founder of Parisi Tech. Naya Zarate from Continuous Solutions here in Portland, is the founder and a recipient of numerous SBIR grants. And Katie Schaefer is the founder and the business development director at eWind in Beaverton. So what I'm going to do is just kind of ask each of the panelists in this order to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about the company and technology and their SBIR history. I will ask one or two questions just to get the momentum going of each panelist, and then we'll turn it over to a live Q&A from the YouTube comments. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Emily. Please tell us about Parisi Tech.
Great. Hi, everyone. So we are developing a lightweight, highly impact-resistant and anti-ballistic material specifically for aerospace, automotive, and defense applications. We were awarded National Science Foundation Phase 1 SBIR, and we are primarily using it to continue optimizing our material, optimizing our processing, so we can actually integrate it into the market and make it a viable commercial product. So that's pretty much the gist of what we're working on right now.
And what are your SBIR plans, or how is that going, and how are you using that SBIR money?
So it's been going really well, better than expected. We are actually almost doubled the initial performance target that we set out to complete. And the National Science Foundation has a great basically supplementary program you can do during your award, where you do very intense customer discovery and really develop your commercialization strategy. So we've done that, and now we are finally wrapping up and getting ready to submit our Phase 2.
Thanks, Emily. Naya, tell us about your SBIR history and company.
Yeah, so my company is called Continuous Solutions. We were founded in 2014. We won our first SBIR award in 2015 under the topic High Performance Motor Controller to reduce acoustic noise for a switch reluctance motor or machine. And this is an application to integrated starter generator for a tactical vehicle in the Army. We took this all the way to Phase 3, and that contract lasted 4 years. So we were awarded Phase 1, 2, and 3. In 2016, we were awarded an STTR for medium voltage DC grounding schemes. The objective of this Phase 2 topic was to develop an affordable general method for grounding of medium voltage direct current zonal electrical power systems for naval ships. So Continuous Solutions, in conjunction with our partner, Purdue University, have identified a suite of common mode current, we identified common mode current as the major grounding related issues and problems that impeded development and brought adaptation of the DC power systems for the US Navy ships. So through our Phase 2 period, CS and Purdue developed a suite of novel common mode mitigating solutions. We're continuing on this project to a second SBIR, which is possible. So this project started in 2016, and it's going to be continuing until 2023. In 2017, we were awarded another STTR for a new integrated total design of unmanned underwater vehicles, the propulsion system architecture for high efficiency and low noise. And what we did in this project is we designed a multi-physics, multi-objective optimization propulsion model. We accidentally missed the deadline, which is very possible, by a couple of days, which prevented us from enacting the Phase 2. In 2018, we were awarded a fourth award for power dense rotating machine for propulsion and power generation, and we are starting our Phase 2 on that one as well. So we have funding from 2018 to 2023. And yeah, so this is the history of the company's awards.
Thanks, Naya. And Katie, tell us about eWind.
Hi, hey, thanks everybody for joining us today. Approximately 2 billion people are without access to power throughout the world, and another 800 million have limited access. So in response to this problem, we have developed an airborne wind energy system that replaces a traditional ground turbine. And it's a completely portable system, which brings a lot of advantages because we've been able to alleviate all of the high capital costs, such as the tower, the concrete slabs that traditional turbines have to sit on. And it allows us to bring power to very remote rural areas where traditional turbines just are not feasible. And airborne wind is fairly new, but there's definitely a number of advantages. And the main one being is that we can capture better winds at altitude, which allow us to generate up to 4 times more power versus traditional wind turbines, and up to 2 to 3 times more energy than solar at 1/4 the cost. And so we've been fortunate enough to be funded through the United States Department of Agriculture. We've received 4 awards starting in 2015 with a phase 1. In 2016, we got a phase 2 as a follow-on to that first phase 1. And then in 2017, we have 4 components to our technology. And so the second phase 1 was for the second part, our ground station. So we had a phase 1 there, and then a follow-on phase 2 in 2018. So to date, we have 1.4 million in funding through the USDA. We've been invited by the National Science Foundation to submit for the third component of our technology, and we'll be submitting that application and proposal in the next few weeks. And then we are now engaged with the Marines, working with a specific group at DoD. So that application won't be a traditional SBIR, but we are working with the Logistics Combat Element Systems under their Marine Corps Systems Command. So we're really looking forward to that. So that's kind of where we are right now, and looking forward to seeing what the NSF has to say with regard to what we're doing.
Great, thank you, Katie. There are a ton of questions rolling in, so I think I will just ask one more general question for each of you to respond to, and then go straight to these very good questions I'm seeing in the chat. So starting with Emily, for Parisi Tech, what would you say was your biggest challenge in submitting the SBIR proposal? And either because you learned something or because you would do it differently, what would you recommend a new company just starting out to do better?
Yeah, no worries. I see it like some similar questions actually in the chat, but all I can say is the first time is definitely going to be the hardest. Not having content already established was very difficult. What else? But the good thing is that if you don't get it the first round, you will end up getting a bunch of comments, and then it is a lot less effort to resubmit in the next window, which also makes writing a phase 2 easier for similar reasons. But also, I think that when you get ready to submit, you really should get to know the portal. Don't wait until the last day or the last few hours. National Science Foundation has a really helpful IT group that works extended hours to help you guide along with this, because it can be complicated and you don't want to, risk missing the deadline. But also, do your government registrations really early as well. Those can take a couple weeks, if not a couple months, to get right. Stuff like DUNS, SAMs, NIAX, all of that should be done earlier than later. And then you really need to have a decent idea of who's going to be your beachhead market. If you are allowed to change it up later on, that's totally fine to pivot. But you need a strong sense of who you want your initial target customer to be, and you need to be able to back that up. I really recommend, working with industry contacts earlier than later. And back to the point, someone had how is a technical innovation defined? At least with the National Science Foundation, though they want you to be really focused on your initial target customer, they also really want communication on how this technology can impact, like what's the scale of impact and who's going to impact and why it matters. So I think focusing on that is really important as well.
Thanks, Emily. And that's a great observation about needing to define kind of your initial customer and your beachhead market. And the more you understand of whether or not you're going to meet their needs and whether you solve their problems, the better I think the less trouble you'll have downstream and having to pivot.
Yeah, and I tried to initially do multiple, and that just shows unfocused. So really just pick one and do a deep dive into what it would take to integrate into that market.
Right, moving on, same question for Naya. For continuous solutions, what was your biggest challenge, at least for your first couple of SBIRs?
Yeah, so the grant writing process or the contract application for SBIR can be very rigorous, especially with highly technical DoD applications. So depending on the agency that you're going for, it could be an open topic. I think NSF does a lot of open topics. DoD does very specific call to actions or solicitations. And it's just really important to offer a solution in which you can see the end prototype or the end product. So kind of similar to what Emily and Leon were saying, that you need to figure out your market. I would say with the DoD SBIR-STTR, I would say you would need to tease out that prototype or that physical form of what you could potentially get continue on funding for. That could be a solution for the specific solicitation. So with having the end in mind, when you first start to write your proposals, that would help to construct the proposal to have a direction and to also have like a semi marketing angle, I would say, because you are trying to sell your solution to the agency. The agency is your client, and I'm speaking solely from the DoD aspect. You really want to give yourself maybe 1 or 2 months, dedicating about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 hours a week. Having multiple people help you construct that proposal that are in the technical area is very important. Having potentially a tech partnership or somebody who did their PhD in that area is very important to have in the proposal. So providing a pathway to success in the proposal is extremely important to the very detailed. We do week by week details of deliverables for our proposals. And that's how detailed we are. Obviously, there's no determination if something goes wrong. There might be delays, but we still act and create the proposals in a way in which we have those deliverables being given and met. So that's what I would say in terms of challenging aspects of this application. It's almost, if you don't have a prototype ready and if you don't have any hardware, it's a little scary to make promises that you may not be able to fulfill. And so preparing you and your team to not overpromise and not put yourself over your head, I think is the most, or get in over your head. So make sure that you're as confident in your technical abilities as you are in your proposal writing abilities.
Thanks, Naya. Not over-promising and then under-delivering is always good advice. You probably want to under-promise and then over-deliver. And Katie, can you tell us what was eWin's greatest challenge?
I think from the get-go, we realized that because we were new to this, that we needed probably some guidance. And so I would highly recommend, if it's your first go at any type of proposal writing, that you either get together with a service that is familiar with the different governmental agencies and can guide you into kind of the specifics that each one looks for, the little nuances. I also think the biggest thing is it's a daunting task. I mean, obviously, we're proof that it can easily, I shouldn't say easily, but it can be done. And there is a lot of funding available, but you want to have a clear plan. And one of the things that's changed a little bit, I think, with all of the agencies is there is a big emphasis on what is the commercial ability of your technology. Will you be able to commercialize it? So that's the first thing that you have to take a look at. And then I would say, anytime you're looking at anything that has to do with the government, if it says 60 days, you need to bump that out to about 120 days. The timelines are crazy, and a lot of things come up where you've got to be prepared and have more time. I know that on our first phase one, we started, I think, writing it with the help. We did use VirtuLab at the time, and they were very helpful in us being successful with our first grant. We thought we gave enough time with about 60 days, and we actually needed about 90 days. So I think it's really key that you allot a lot of time to familiarize yourself, with what you want to put into it. Just to kind of piggyback on what Naya said, really having a clear, concise plan to your technology development is crucial. The other thing is there's a lot of agencies that you have to register with, or a lot of different governmental sites that you have to register with. And some of those take time for you to get different numbers, Dun & Bradstreet, NICS, there's a whole bunch of things that need to be done ahead of time. And if you don't have all of those in place, your proposal will be rejected. And you don't want to spend months working on a proposal to have it rejected for something silly that you could have done early on. So I say research the topics. I know somebody in the feed had asked about solicitations being posted. The other thing is, if you have a technology that you're not sure, maybe somebody else has already submitted, you can at any time go to sam.gov, or you can look on the SBIR-STTR website, and you can pull up previous proposals, and you can look and see what people have submitted, what was successful, and then you can kind of use that to gauge too maybe what you're doing. So there's a lot of little things like that. And if somebody later on wants to reach out to me and ask for those things, I'm happy to share that with you. Because there's a lot of trial and error. And if any of the three of us can help you to avoid some things to make your experience and your process smoother, and we're happy to do that.
Thank you, Katie. And that's a great segue into some of the additional information we'd like to provide to the audience. So the second question before we open it up, or I should say the last question, what resource or resources help you the most, either in the proposal preparation or the specific task of getting to a stage where your product was feasible enough to apply and then perform the research for the grant? So Emily, please go ahead.
Yeah, so as someone who had never done this before last year, a couple of people asked, do you need people to help you out and guide you? And that's, in my opinion, an absolute yes. There are a lot of inner workings of each agency that it's really great to have someone with that knowledge and background. Leon from VirtuLab, as well as Steve from OTBC, were very helpful with this. To actually hire a grant writer, Business Oregon has a phase 0 program, which will allow you to use a couple grand of funding for whatever gets you to submitting that proposal. If that's legal fees, if that's hiring a grant writer, that's a really great resource. And then find industry leaders and people who have SBIR experience to review your proposal. I was taking anyone when I was getting ready to submit. I think that there's no such thing as bad feedback, and getting a lot of different perspectives and eyes, especially from different sectors of the industry, is really important. And then if you do get an NSF phase 1, or actually I think you can get this prior to NSF phase 1, is they have an I-Corps program, which is what I mentioned previously, which gives you the funding to do a really deep dive into what your potential beachhead market is, and develop your MVP, and just to gear up for writing your phase 2 and developing a commercialization strategy. So those are the main ones that come to mind.
Thanks, Emily. And just as a quick note, the attendees may have been hearing the terms phase 1 and phase 2 from all three panelists. SBIR grants, I didn't mention early in the basics presentation, but SBIR grants are almost always administered in 2 phases, which each have to be applied for separately. Phase 1 is more of a research proof of concept project, kind of an icebreaker for $100,000 to $200,000 award, depending on the agency, and can last 6 to 12 months. If you're successful, and generally only phase 1 awardees are invited to apply for phase 2, you then go on to do more of a long-term product development, shake out the bug, full prototype development project that can last up to 2 years, and most of the agencies now are offering $1 million for that. So overall, you can get between $1 to $1.5 million for a phase 1 and 2, but you pretty much in all cases have to start at phase 1. So I hope that hope nobody was confused by that on the phone, but hope that clears up. So moving on again to continuous solutions, and Naya, what resources help you the most?
Yeah, so I would definitely say look for clients outside of SBIR, STTR. So, you need to diversify your revenue to make it to be a successful company. And one of the biggest resources that we had was pre-existing clientele before we started moving towards the SBIR, STTR. There's just added revenue that we could focus on, fulfilling our clients' needs as well as writing our own future, basically. And just having that overlap is very helpful. So I would encourage you to work on, finding clients if you're a consultant, or moving forward in other product developments that you can sell outside of the government. Now, with the resources that helped me write the proposal, I would say another big thing was developing a proper partnership with leaders in the industry. So that has been very helpful for Continuous Solutions. We work primarily with Purdue University as our academic partners, and we have a couple of massive corporate partnerships, strategic partnerships. And when you are writing your proposal, it's really great to have letters of recommendation on your technology and to accompany that in your proposal. So having the technical relationships outside of academics actually show a pathway for your technology and outside companies' interest. That was, I believe, a huge resource.
Naya, excuse me, did you use any outside groups like entrepreneurial support groups or go to conferences? What was like the best way to connect with industry for you?
So I have gone to through several programs, DoD Velociter program. I went through an I-Corp program. I went through Clean Tech Cascadia Challenge program. I did a Stanford scaling program. So pretty much every year I'm finding different programs that apply to business and government contracting to just like enhance my knowledge and continue learning and growing. In terms of writing the proposals, I never got outside help from anyone. It was our own internal team that wrote the proposals.
All right, thank you. And Katie, EWIN's greatest challenge.
Well, I think kind of backtracking again on what Naya was just saying, the really important thing was to do market research. Obviously, as entrepreneurs, right, we all think we have fabulous, fantastic ideas, and sometimes we kind of need to vet those ideas. And so for the first year before we even tackled SBIR, is we went out and did a lot of market research, and our first early adoptive customer was small to mid-sized farms in rural communities. And we probably met with 70 different farmers, from wineries to, organic growers. And we needed to make sure that there was a need for what we were doing. And then once we did that, it was really important to have those letters of recommendation, that if we could commercialize this technology, is there a market for it? And so we did that. And when we submitted our first phase one of the comments that came back from the USDA was they rarely had that many letters of recommendation from different agencies, and they were really impressed with that. So I think that was really helpful. As far as outside help, again, none of us had written grants, and so we realized there was a need to bring in an outside party to help. And at that time, we were in an incubator in Beaverton at OTBC. And so we had the resources from Oregon Best, which is now Virtue Lab, and they provided us with a $5,000 grant to help with writing our first proposal. And they put us in contact with some grant writers that had a pretty good success record in winning awards for their clients. And so we partnered with them. And I think that was probably one of the most valuable resources we had, because again, we didn't know what are they looking for? What do they want to hear? What do they want to know? And each agency definitely has its own nuances. We're finding out now in working with the Department of Defense, they're not so worried about commercialization of what we're doing. They just want it needs to work, and it needs to work fast, and it needs to work effectively, for what they want from our technology, versus commercialization viability down the road to outside sources. And so it was good to have that help in writing that first grant, and it made writing the next three a lot easier. So if you have the resources, or you have the ability to connect with somebody outside, I would highly recommend it. They can keep you on track, and I think they're really helpful.
All right, thank you. So does anybody else hear a bad echo? I'm not sure why that's happening. I think my phone is somehow doing it. All right, thanks to the panelists. I can see the questions piling up in chat. So without any more formal discussion, I'm going to switch to that. But first, I do want to thank all three of the panelists, who are very busy entrepreneurs, for making the time to go ahead and give back to the community.
Can I add one thing real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Katie. So
when we're talking about resources too, another group in Oregon that helped us is Business Oregon, and they have a lot of really good programs to help you get started too in the SBIR process. And I know they provide follow-on funding to SBIRs. And I know that every year the legislature kind of approves that, but they were very helpful to us in a pinch when we were in between funding from one of our grants. And so we were really appreciative. So there's a lot of resources actually that the state of Oregon does offer. And they certainly are another one that you will want to explore as you're trying to decide if you want to pursue an SBIR.
Thanks. Yeah, Emily also mentioned the resources being a good, Business Oregon being a good resource. And that program Katie referred to is called the SBIR Matching Grant. So you have to have an SBIR grant in order to get some funds. Then this basically covers, it's almost a bridge between a phase one and a phase two, or a phase two and going to market. And it covers things that aren't necessarily eligible for government funding, but can be paid for out of the state grant.
We also have a zero phase as well. It's a $5,000 grant for writing.
Yeah, thanks, Naya. Yeah, and that is specifically for proposal assistance services, and was, I believe, utilized by Parisi Tech for their phase one as well.
Yeah.
So, all right, thanks again. So we're not going anywhere. We have plenty of time to answer these questions, and I think unless anybody has a specific question they're dying to answer on the panel, what I'm going to do is just more or less run through first in, first out, and sort of combine similar questions. And I might answer a specific question, or I might throw it to one or two of you on the panel. Please don't feel obliged to, every person doesn't have to answer every question, but I'll see what the question is a good match for. So one of the questions that was sort of already answered is whether or not SBIR topics are issued on a regular calendar cycle and if there's a way to monitor them. And the answers in the chat this corresponded very well. And to flesh that out a little bit more, every agency has their own schedule. They do not accept unsolicited proposals. You can't just send them a random thing. But when they do have an open period, usually which closes with a deadline, you are invited to apply, and that can either be once, twice, or sometimes 3 times a year, depending on the size of the agency. And you can learn a lot more about this calendar by either subscribing to the VirtuLab newsletter, or the VirtuLab website actually has a nice little pictograph that's independent of actually which year is occurring, that just sort of gives you a feel for what agencies are open. So please check that out. Next question, and every agency, of course, has to do everything their own way. So there's no synchronization or dead periods. And I can tell you, as someone who's been working on proposals that are due in New Year's, the agencies don't necessarily respect vacations as well as they should. All right, next good question. How is technical innovation defined? What constitutes science or engineering innovation? Do any of the panelists want to tackle that?
Yeah, like before, I think it's just, novel, applicable, and high impact applicability to society and industry. And just, you have to really be honest. At least in your phase 1, we were really focusing on what is the most relevant competition and how are we different and why does this matter. So at least for our strategy with that, it's really important to focus on why this is the technical innovation. Why does this matter? Why does this merit an award?
And then I would like to add to that. So a lot of the times in the background of the proposal, that's a time for you to kind of do a mini literature review and show that you have investigated other technologies that may be competing with your technical innovation, but it's really important to show that you have understanding of the competing technologies and show your technical innovation directly next to the existing technologies.
Thank you. And to everyone, I would add that this does not, again, have to be a university research innovation or have any university lineage. About half of the companies I work with are either university spinouts or in some way are collaborating with a university. But the other half, and I think all 3 of our panelists actually did not spin out a technology from a university here. So it's very easy to be successful if you have your own innovation or scientific new technology. Thanks for that question. A little nuts and bolts question I will answer. The question is that the qualified team that you will hire should be in the United States, and that answer is solidly yes. All SBIR proposals and projects, regardless of agency, requires that the work be performed in the United States by researchers or engineers qualified, legally allowed to work in the US. In some cases, you could have a team member that is remote outside of the US as an advisor, but generally they will not be doing the active research work. And the small business also has to be majority owned and operated in the United States. Thanks for that question. Next question, I think I'll throw back to the panel. Some of you have already kind of answered this. When does it make sense or not make sense to hire a professional grant writer? And Katie, I think you've had that direct experience. So and it sounds like you endorse it. What would you say to the person asking that?
Again, if you've got the resources to do it, after contacting the various agencies that will actually help you financially to do that, I would not take on writing a grant without having outside help. Somebody to guide you through the process, somebody who knows, again, the nuances of the NIH, NSF, USDA, DOD, what have you, because there are different nuances for each one. And there's different things that you have to be aware of that will be coming up. And there's a lot of unknowns. And if you go to any of the governmental sites and you look at the solicitations, they're confusing. And the other thing I would add when you ask what would I do differently is you've got to read through all 397 billion pages of their solicitations, because they're very specific in the format. I mean, they have all these little things that they look for. And if you don't comply with what they're asking for, they'll deny your solicitation or your proposal. So again, if you have somebody that's jumped through those hoops and is familiar with the grant writing process, again, I cannot stress the importance of getting help on your first run. Don't try it on your own. I know a lot of entrepreneurs since 2013 when we started this that have tried to submit proposals and they get rejected left and right. And it's always little things, but had they sourced information from somebody who was familiar with the process, they had a much higher likelihood of getting that proposal approved and awarded. So again, if you can get the help, do it.
Thanks, Katie. So I've got another sort of nuts and bolts question from Rachel Bell. Does every federal office participate? And Rachel is interested in the General Printing Office. And unfortunately, that is not one of the SBIR agencies that participates. I knew I would have to show this slide, but I deleted it in the interest of time, but I'm just going to bite the bullet and share. And so the 12 federal agencies, I say 12, two of the agencies are actually, two of the offices are actually in one agency, the Department of Commerce. So the 12 agencies are Department of Defense, NIH, National Institute of Health, which is part of Health and Human Services, DOE, NSF, and then this is sort of in the order of the size of the budget. DOD has almost $2 billion of that $4 billion budget in 2020. NIH has almost $1 billion. And then the other agencies shown in this pie chart have about $200 million annually each. Obviously, that goes out in a large number of awards at $100,000 or $200,000 per award. And then the smaller agencies that are very specific to a given niche are like Department of Transportation, National Oceanographic and Administrative Agency, and Department of Education is a good one if you're working on an educational game or something for the K-12 school system. But these agencies are much smaller, shown in green. They all have about $10 to $20 million budgets and only give out 50 to 100 awards per year. But unfortunately, yeah, if an agency does not have a research budget, for instance, generally the Department of Commerce or the Department of Labor doesn't do any scientific research, then they don't have an SBIR program. That was a good question, though, and I just had to show that slide. So thanks for the chance to respond to that. Let's see. Next question from Jim Bodillo. If your technology doesn't align with the specific agency topics or solicitations, is it worth pursuing? Who would like to tackle that? Go ahead, Katie.
I'll take that one just because I think we're a prime example. We have a renewable energy technology. So of course, the first thing we thought was Department of Energy, and then we looked at the military. And at that time, there were no open solicitations that we thought intersected with what we were developing. And I just happened to be on the USDA website, and lo and behold, there was a topic that fit into what we were doing. And so my advice is, look through all of the open topics and solicitations when they come out from the various governmental agencies, because a lot of times there will be something that is topic appropriate to your technology but through a governmental agency that you didn't think, you know, it was possible or would be interested. And I think the other thing that we were told is you can go back and you can look at other solicitations that are now closed, because there's a whole listing of them, and I don't remember how many years they go back. If you can find an open topic, or I'm sorry, a closed topic that relates to your technology, there will be a program director, national program leader that is usually listed with that closed solicitation and that person's contact information. It is not wrong in any way, and you're certainly open to do this, is you can reach out to that person and you can tell them what you're doing. It's not a guarantee, but sometimes, and we've talked to a number of people that have had it happen, where they reopened that solicitation for them, or they were able to work with that entrepreneur in developing that technology, and they eventually got funding. So if you're not finding what you are hoping to find during an open solicitation, it might be worthwhile to go look at some of the closed ones and see if there is a topic that closely relates to what you're doing, and then reach out to that national program leader and see what they have to say. I mean, it's worth it. And like I said, I've known a number of people that have done that and actually were awarded SBIR funding, you know, in a relatively short amount of time.
And I would add to that by saying, also, if you can't find a specific solicitation that aligns perfectly with your technology, try to be creative in the sense of there could potentially be a project that can be creatively, I don't know, proposed for the technology that you're doing. For instance, our acoustic noise reduced motor controller was actually not so much built for an acoustic reduction, but it was designed for vibration reduction. And when we were looking through the solicitations, we saw an acoustic noise reduction. We're like, well, I don't know, it's a far stretch. I'm not sure if it's not going to be picked or anything. So let's just try and see if we can state or make the point of, you know, reducing vibration will ultimately reduce the noise in the machine. And by kind of thinking outside of the box and not finding a very specific solicitation that asked for vibration reduction, but kind of thinking outside of the box and saying, hey, actually the vibration, the acoustics, we can kind of build a bridge. It's just a matter of how creative can your mind expand to build the bridge between what they're looking for and the technology you have, and how to build that bridge between it. So upon first looking at the solicitations, what our company does is typically have all of the technical team look through the solicitations. Each one picks out all of the ones that could potentially be applied to our capabilities. And then from there, we sit around as a group and then further distill the solicitations that we could win. And I think it's just a really good exercise to go through with your technical team or with another person in your area of expertise to really sit down and have an open discussion on how this technology could be applied to any of the solicitations, even remotely related.
That's a good overview. And for those people on the phone or on the Zoom that want to kind of dive into some of these topics, searching a little bit more, please check out the resources that we've provided, and especially the SBIR.gov website tutorials, and there's an award search function that can help you navigate some of these, or again, schedule an individual consult, and I can show you how to do that. I did want to mention that there's been a theme and some comments in the chat about kind of the specificness of topics and an individual company's technology. And specifically amongst those 12 agencies I showed, there's variations not just in the mission and the administrative procedures, but in how specific a given opportunity or topic is. And I think Steve, using the Startup SOS account, rightly commented that National Science Foundation of all the agencies is the absolute most general. And as long as what you have is innovative, you almost don't even have to apply to a given topic area, but they just have very broad areas and you just submit and they decide whether or not you're innovative enough. NSF doesn't buy the technology. They absolutely don't care. They think the market decides what the winners and losers are. Other agencies are a little bit more specific and they're sort of a spectrum, and probably in not like with NIA's experience with Department of Defense, they are the absolutely most specific topics, and the Army, Navy, or other service or component wants to literally buy what you will eventually commercialize. It can be dual use, but they very specifically already have a problem they want you to solve and a pretty good idea of how they want you to solve it. So there's a spectrum. NSF and DoD are kind of the most extreme. Somebody like NASA and Department of Energy are sort of in the middle. But in general, I would echo the panelists' advice that if you don't see what you want just at a given snapshot at a given month of a year, keep looking or look at past solicitations and keep monitoring that particular topic area of that agency to see if it comes up again. Or as Katie said, write to the program manager and just ask, did you get any awards for that topic you closed? Do you think it'll be open again? Are there similar programs? And depending on the agency and the individuals involved, some managers are really helpful. I mean, they want to find cool tech. They're trying to solve some critical problem, whether it's in the Navy or Department of Energy or agriculture. They want to see someone get to market with something that improves society in some way.
I had a little bit on that as well, just the National Science Foundation.
Yeah.
Okay. So with them, like Leanne was saying, they just want high impact, high risk technologies. That being said, you're kind of given the burden of making sure you have a really viable commercialization plan. And one thing that I really found out from being in this customer discovery program with quite a few, I think 20 different startups that were given the same award during the same time, is you absolutely need someone with a industry background on your team. I think that's probably the most important thing to being successful. Even though it sounds great that you can pick whichever direction you want and you can pivot and that's okay, the burden is on you to really prove it out and do a deep dive. So I think having those industry connections are really important for NSF.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I would totally second that. The downside of them accepting almost anything is that you have to then prove what your idea is working on is both a good approach to solving the problem and that there'll be customers for it. Whereas DoD they already have experts in the field, experts in an acquisition program. They're pretty sure they know what the solution to the problem is. They just want someone to deliver it. So thanks for all those questions. I'm going to randomize things a bit and jump to the front of the pack with a little bit of a different sort of question from Ryan Schwartz. How has COVID and the recession affected SBIR? And I will give a brief answer and see what the panelists also think. So Ryan, the answer is it's complicated. Some of the agencies actually really scrambled to offer new funding for COVID, notably National Institute of Health, an agency called BARDA, and National Science Foundation that the other panelists have been talking about, actually had a special letter of invitation and a streamlined process for COVID-related technologies, whether it was biological, countermeasures, protective devices, air quality handling. So that was really cool, but that has kind of died down. The recession has definitely not affected the funding path. And if anything, the federal budget's going to go up next year. But there were some administrative delays right around March and April as agencies actually cut applicants quite a lot of slack and delayed deadlines, allowed for incomplete proposals, partly because a lot of the universities and institutions they were working with had shutdowns. So you literally couldn't get a letter of support or a budget from a university you were working with if the entire staff of the university was working from home. So, that was only my experience. Do any of the other panelists want to chime in about how COVID either affected their applications or their awards?
I didn't notice anything. The only thing that really affected us is the USDA moved, not their scientific research department out of DC into the Midwest, but all of their administrative people, and they lost about 80% of their staff because they didn't want to move out of the DC area. So that was the only thing that really affected us. And it was just a slowdown again with a timeline. It made it difficult for us to receive the second part of our second phase 2 funding, just because there wasn't anybody there to enter the data and push the button and release the funds. So that was a challenge. But other than that, I haven't seen anything with regard to COVID. I talk to our national program leader all the time. He checks in with us, and we update him on how it's going, because we are actually phasing out this phase 2 December 31st, and then we'll have our final report due. But as far as I can tell, it's business as usual.
For continuous solutions, we had a pretty much, during the lockdown, there was everything virtual. So we typically go to DC, Philadelphia, and go to the research centers to do face-to-face meetings. All of that was converted to virtual, which makes sense. And fairly disappointing, because we want to see different demos. We want to have that face-to-face. We want them to see our prototypes working in our laboratories. So it was a little bit of a bummer not being able to get those face-to-face meetings. But for the most part, in terms of our funding, all of our program managers really stepped up, and because they were working from home with the concern that our work may get stalled, we actually have had little to no delay on any funding, which is pretty amazing. Everybody was working in May to get us continuation funding for November, knowing that we're probably going to have a pretty big delay. So what I would say is develop that relationship with your technical point of contact, your program managers, your contract officers, everybody that's on your contract when you win the SBIR. All of their names, their numbers, their email addresses are available for you to contact them directly. And so when you think there might be a conflict in the contract or a delay in something on your side, everybody can be contacted, and vice versa. On their side, in times of a pandemic, you can contact everybody, which is the nice part about it. The other thing would probably be so our company is in the Portland State Business Accelerator. That's where our lab is. And we actually had a confirmed case in the accelerator, which put us in lockdown and prevented us from going to the lab. Good news is that a lot of our work is simulation work, so we can do it remotely. And that's always really important, is to have, as much as possible, good systems in place to be able to work remotely.
You're muted.
Thanks, Naya. I hope that the lab stays healthy and opens at full research capacity soon. So there's a couple more interesting questions. And if any of the panelists is seeing something in chat they want to call out to answer, please feel free. One of the more recent questions, where is Department of Commerce on the spectrum between NSF and DoD? I'll answer that one. Their Department of Commerce, as I mentioned, is the one with two actual offices, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and then NIST, National Institute of Science Standards and Technology. And oddly enough, NOAA just became a full granting agency and became more general in their topics. They just have topic areas on things like aquaculture, monitoring technologies, marine life monitoring and other things. Whereas NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, offers a lot on kind of some software, manufacturing technologies. They remain what's considered a contract agency with very specific topics and deliverables for their contracts. So they're kind of in the middle, but NIST is definitely more like a specific agency like DoD, and NOAA is becoming much more like a scientific research agency. Do any of the panelists see any other questions in chat they would really like to answer?
Yes.
Who's that? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do these have to be companies creating tangible products, or can they be a digital product? What about a technical service like an app? Absolutely, it can be a digital product. In fact, I think that it's, from my perspective, more encouraged to have either software, an app, or a digital product to come out of your proposal. That the reason being is because a tangible prototype and product is extremely more expensive. So if you think about a 1.5 or $1 million contract over the course of 2 or 3 years, you can do much more with a digital product than you can with prototyping. Speaking from a person who does mainly hardware. It's been very what is it called? Very scrappy to build hardware with these grants.
I'll second that. The amount of funding that we need for all of our materials and our prototypes, and then our travel, because where we test, it's 3 hours out to Pendleton every time to test out there. And it sounds like a lot of money, but it goes very quickly. So I would agree, if you're on the hardware side, it goes a lot faster.
Looks like Steve has pulled a couple of questions to the head of the pack in the chat, so I'll take a stab at a couple of these. How heavy or burdensome are the post-grant reporting requirements? Does this complicate your accounting and reporting significantly? I think the panelists should answer that because they've actually done this. I only observe it.
From the grant reporting requirements, I only have experience with the USDA. We've not had a problem with that. It's a fairly straightforward system they use. It's called Report, and we do a midterm report, and then we do a final report. And then I think everybody has to do, we have an annual financial 425 that's due every February, and then you have another financial report that's due again at that midterm, and then when you're closing out your grant. But it's fairly straightforward. I would recommend, especially if you're fortunate enough to receive multiple grants, you need to have a separate accounting system. We use a CPA firm, and we run our payroll through a professional company. We don't do any of that on site. It's just a lot easier to do it that way, and we don't have to worry about whether we're making mistakes. But they will require you to have an approved accounting system. And so you need to be aware that you would need to have that. But as far as final reporting and everything, it's not been a problem for us at all.
Thanks, Katie.
We meet our benchmarks, so I guess that makes it easier. We're happy to submit our reports. So,
Naya or Emily?
Yeah, so I can go. The post-reporting, so typically with the DoD, we are doing interim reports, progress reports every 2 months. And that's a full-blown write-up of everything that we've done. And we typically also do a monthly presentation for our clients. This is to keep communication flowing between the agency and Continuous Solution, because you want everybody on the same page with you as you're moving forward and moving down the contract fulfillment. So there's no shocks at the end of the year or at the end of phase 1. There's no surprises. You really want to have everybody that's on the agency side coming along with you on your development. I can't stress this enough, because there has been times where communication's off, or something is promised, but there's a misunderstanding. So you just need to make sure that everybody is communicating properly. That will also ensure that they understand the amount of work you're doing and your technical capacity. So yeah, I mean, the proposal writing and getting the contract is very competitive, but I would also state that maintaining that contract into a phase 2 is also very competitive. So phase 1 to phase 2, you're typically not the only company that they pick for phase 1. You're typically competing with 2 or 3 other companies under the same solicitation topic, which means that you're still in competition. And even then, in phase 2, they may pick 1 or 2 out of the 3 or 4 companies from phase 1. So it's just really important to maintain professionalism and to understand that the agency who's giving you the contract is your client. So treat them as a client that you would have in the civilian sector as well.
That's a great observation.
So,
yeah, go ahead, Emily.
Okay, I was just going to add to that. So for the NSF, in order to get a phase 2, you are going to go through a mandatory auditing process where you have to have a CPA prepare financial statements. You have to have actual software tracking your booking. You have to be very cut and dry on checks and balances in your accounting system. And my program officer warned me very early on that he has had some amazing startups that had great success in their technology development and commercialization plan actually get cut from phase 2, and you only get one shot at phase 2 because they didn't have the correct accounting system set in place. I also learned the hard way at the beginning of this year was don't skimp, don't like get the cheap software and try to do it all yourself. Like find a CPA, delegate, like you don't have time for that. And you end up paying for it a little later on when you're trying to get everything correct and flowing. So yeah.
So someone asked a question which Naya was actually starting to answer, which is what is the success rate of phase 1 and phase 2, which you mentioned still being competitive? Steve answered in the chat that it was between 1 and 10, 1 out of every 10, 1 out of every 15 is funded. That may seem pessimistic. My experience has been a little bit more like 1 in every 7 or 8. But I would say that by planning ahead, being professional, and really knowing you have a good project that's responsive to the needs of the agencies and benchmark will at least double your odds. And that's all for phase 1. Phase 2, in case people are interested, obviously you already have to be successful in your phase 1, but that is about 1 in every 2. So 50% chance of getting your phase 2 funding. Mm-hmm. And commercial success and product feasibility is much more important in a phase 2. Do either of you have any other comments? Naya, I know you've probably written 1 or 2 unsuccessful proposals. What were your odds?
So our it's like a award rate would be around 80%. So 80% of the proposals that we submit, we're winning, and which is it's pretty high. But I know that when I first started down this pathway, I was reading stories of like 1 in 20 proposals are being accepted. So, it's competitive.
Naya, you've clearly unlocked the secret of success rate at 80%. That is really awesome. Everybody write to Naya after this. She knows more than me.
I think
can't promise it for every other proposal.
I think it's the agency too. I mean, we, all 4 of ours were accepted and funded. We had a 5th one actually, and it wasn't denied. It was just that it was at the, when we changed the administration 4 years ago, They said that it was a fundable grant and that they would fund it at a later date. And so they've asked us to resubmit it, and we just haven't done that. So I'd say we're batting pretty good with the USDA. I think for them, they actually have it on their website, or the last time I looked, they fund 20% of phase ones.
Yeah.
And almost up to 70% of the phase twos.
USDA has really high funding rate, partly because
they do.
I think they get a relatively few number of proposals. So
they don't get the traffic that NIH and NSF get at all. But
there's another good question in the chat. Mizana asks, my team is currently drafting an NSF project pitch for the benefit of everybody who's in Zoom. What that is basically a pre-application or a letter of intent. And if you're successful and it gets accepted, then you get invited to submit a full proposal. Mizana, and it's a nice, really low overhead, no registration required, basically a 3-page summary. It's a lot easier to do than a full proposal. So it's nice to know that you're not wasting your time by doing this really, really quick 3-pager. Mizana asks, is it true that these can be submitted at any time? And the short answer is yes. NSF is always open to receive project pitches. They generally turn them around in 2 weeks, usually sooner. And once you are invited, or once it's accepted, that invitation lasts for a year. You can submit your full proposal in response to that project pitch invitation anytime a year after you receive the invitation. So NSF, in case people didn't pick this up, me and at least Emily have had success and enjoy working with the agency. They're really accessible. Their project managers often respond to questions and do live. We'll meet with you to discuss things if you have good questions. And they also give you full review or feedback, whether your proposal is accepted or rejected. So I find, and in addition to the project pitch, they've got an open window with a rolling average of a rolling window of 4 open windows. So you don't even have to worry about deadlines that much with NSF. Thanks for that question. And if anybody, again, Virtue Lab and other resources can help, not just in the full proposal preparation, we can help you figure out how to submit a project pitch and review and critique that and help you write that. Am I missing any other questions?
I see one. Can the accounting costs be included in the proposed budget? And I know for USDA, yes, you can include some of those costs into your proposal.
That's true for NSF also.
For DoD, we have it's called provisional billing rates that you have to submit. The provisional billing rates are based on your accounting system, and what is the percentage of G&A, what is the percentage of overhead, what is the percentage of fringe for the next year. And so, yeah, I mean, as long as your accounting costs align with those percentages, then that percentage can be added into the proposal budget on top of the hourly costs of the technical team. And then, but typically in phase 1, it's called a fixed fee contract, which means you're given several chunks of money throughout the project, depending on what agency it is. They give it to you up front, or they give it to you after you turn in your first progress report. Then you have another one after your second progress report. And then in your final report submission, you get your 3rd installment of the fixed fee contract. It's only when you move into the phase 2 where your contract type transfers from a fixed fee contract to a cost plus fixed fee or cost-based reimbursement, in which you need to front the costs for that first 30 days. After the first 30 days, then you can start turning in invoices or an invoice to the federal government to reimburse those costs. So that's like a bridge money that Oregon business helps you out with once you get the phase 2 award.
Yeah, thanks, Naya. So for anybody who is overwhelmed or thinking about not submitting an SBIR because the accounting seems burdensome, you should be aware this is a nice problem to have, and it's very easily solvable. And once you get your phase one, there's a lot of resources and a lot of supplemental funding, like the Business Oregon Matching Grant. There's something called TABA now, Technical and Business Assistance at many of these agencies you can apply for to use to hire additional resources that help with these things. So please don't let that be a reason that you're discouraged from applying. It's an easy problem to solve. So I'm going to hit one or two more last minute questions and then start wrapping up.
Yeah, and I think that the most recent one is actually a pretty good summary question. In that, how many months should be set aside for the grant writing process? And maybe the spin I would add to that is this clearly takes a lot of work. My guess is, since y'all have gone back for a second dip or more, that you figured it was worth it. So maybe just some comments on how many months should you set aside?
I was going to ask that one too, Steve. Great minds think alike.
Can I talk
Emily?
about the first time around?
Go for it, Emily.
So when I decided to start writing this, I was working full-time in aerospace, and I would go every night and like pick away at it at a coffee shop. I think it took like 5 or 6 months. And even then, I mean, it's just, especially when it's the first time around, you're like developing new content versus being able to like, anyways, expand upon your like previous ideas and like, anyways. So yeah, for me at least, it took quite a while and a lot of help from Virtue Lab and a grant writer and people that knew what they were doing.
Thanks.
I second that. 6 months for your first go. I think it's important, and you really need to familiarize yourself with the other agencies, as I mentioned before, and what you need to do with them to prepare.
Naya?
Yeah, so we opened Continuous Solutions April 2014. We started looking at the SBIR as a potential option for us. And I think that was around maybe end of 2014. And then our first contract wasn't awarded to us until October 2015, just to give you an insight. So, I mean, there was a lot of preparation work, making sure all of our T's were crossed and our I's were dotted in terms of being aligned with the program, understanding what is being requested of us. We didn't know of Virtue Labs at the time. I didn't know about any resources for me except what was on the SBIR website. And that took a lot of me sitting in coffee shops and calling everybody I could find on the websites and just trying to talk to people from the federal government to give me hints and make sure that I'm not forgetting anything or missing anything with the proposal, and also being eligible for the proposal. So yeah, it was
Thanks.
I would say like a year.
Thanks, Naya. I think the consensus among the panelists is to plan ahead and be prepared.
100%.
So our time's just about up. I'd like to, if the three of you, if you have any like 1 or 2 sentence last words of advice for prospective SBIR applicants, please go ahead. Anybody can jump in.
I was just going to say, because after this meeting too, you might feel a little overwhelmed, but if you want to reach out and ask further questions, you can email me at Katie, Katie at eWindSolutions.com. And I am happy to answer any questions that I can to help facilitate your process.
Emily, last words?
Yeah, I just start outlining early and tackling it as you go. And as I think the phrase says, like, eat an elephant one bite at a time. Like, that's going to be like your life, but it's totally worth it. And it's been a really exciting journey, and it's worth doing, definitely.
How about you, Naya?
Yeah, so I would say it's an overwhelming process, but it's extremely rewarding. I think that there is something to be said of working on your own project, determining your own future. Entrepreneurship is really exciting. It's even more exciting when it's innovation and technology innovation. So I just encourage everybody to go after what they see in the future for society, and understand that the federal government is helping you do that with this program. I put in my contact in the YouTube comments, but nayazarati.com is active and live. You can see some of the patents, journal articles that we've published under these contracts, as well as schedule a meeting with me. I would love to hear from you, know what you're doing, and help you out in the process. So I encourage everybody, just keep pushing forward, go for it, you got this. And like Emily said, one bite at a time.
Hopefully no one's having an elephant for lunch, but I think it's time now to break. And Steve, do you have any housekeeping, last words of housekeeping?
Yeah, I think just would like to thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Leon and Naya and Emily and Katie. Thank you very much for presenting, and I'd like to encourage everybody, check out the SBIR STTR Success Center. Again, there's a link in the notes, and there's just a ton of good information there from our three panelists. A lot more information, a lot more questions answered about this whole mysterious process. And aside from that, I think that is a wrap up for this session. Thank you all very much.
Thanks to everyone who attended, and good luck with whatever you do.
Yeah, thank you.